My mother wanted to put my child in an orphanage because of my sister's wedding. My mother, Caroline, has always been obsessed with my younger sister, Madeline. For as long as I can remember, everything in our family has revolved around her. If Madeline wanted something, she got it. If Madeline had a problem, my mother dropped everything to solve it. If Madeline wanted attention, my mother made sure she had all of it. I never really cared much about that. I learned to keep my distance. But I think a part of me always believed that, deep down, my mother still loved me too. That I still mattered at least a little bit to her. I was wrong. My mother proved just how little I meant to her when she tried to give my baby away, without my knowledge or consent. And now, she's paying the price. But let's start from the beginning. I gave birth to my son about 3 weeks ago. It was one of the happiest moments of my life, and almost everyone in our family was thrilled to welcome him. Almost. The only person who wasn't happy was my mother. But, of course, I wasn't even surprised. Because in Caroline's world, nothing is more important than Madeline. I got pregnant about a year ago, and when I was 6 months into my pregnancy, Madeline got engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Ethan. It wasn't a shock. She and Ethan had been dating for 3 years, and everyone knew she wanted a huge, over-the-top wedding. Anyone with common sense would understand that by the time Madeline's wedding happened, my baby would have already been born. But apparently, my mother didn't have common sense. Because just a few weeks after Madeline got engaged, she showed up at my house unannounced, acting all concerned. I assumed she was just stopping by to chat, maybe to tell me more about Madeline's wedding plans. But the second she sat down, I knew something was off. She was fidgeting, clearing her throat, clearly nervous. Then she dropped the bombshell. "You need to do something about your pregnancy. For your sister's sake." I laughed. Because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Madeline's wedding is happening this year. And you're having a baby this year. That's a problem." I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "What do you mean, a problem?" I asked. "You're going to take away attention from your sister's big day," she said. "A baby is a bigger milestone than a wedding. People won't be able to focus on her." I was completely dumbfounded. I told her she was overthinking things, that no one was going to skip a wedding just because I had a baby. But she shook her head and said, "That doesn't matter. You'll still take the limelight away from her." I reminded her that I wasn't even invited to the wedding. Madeline and I were never close. I hadn't invited her to my wedding, and she never invited me to hers. So how exactly was I supposed to overshadow something I wasn't even attending? But my mother didn't care. She told me that I needed to hide my pregnancy, to keep it a secret from the entire family and all of our mutual friends. She didn't want anyone to know I was expecting, because in her mind, my baby would steal the spotlight from Madeline's wedding. That was the moment I realized something. I had never been her priority. And I never would be. I lost it. I told her she was being completely ridiculous, and I refused to entertain her insane request. We had a huge fight. And when she left my house that night, I knew we were done. After that argument, I didn't speak to my mother again. I tried to push her out of my mind. I focused on my pregnancy. I leaned on my husband, David, and his side of the family for support. And when my son was born, I felt nothing but happiness. Even though my mother wasn't there. Even though David called her the day I gave birth and she refused to show up, because she was out with Madeline. But even if she had been free that day, I know she wouldn't have come. Because I wasn't a priority to her. And for the first time in my life, I was completely okay with that. For weeks, I had zero contact with her. And I felt free. But then. She called me. Again. And again. And again. At first, I ignored her. But then she started texting me frantically. "Pick up. It's urgent. You need to hear this." I didn't want to respond. I had cut her out of my life, and I wanted it to stay that way. But then I remembered something. Before my father, Henry, passed away, I made him a promise. I promised him I would always look after my mother. Even if it was hard. Even if she didn't deserve it. And that promise weighed on me. So, against my better judgment, I picked up the phone. And that's when I found out she was in serious legal trouble. She was hysterical on the phone. She could barely get the words out. I did something stupid, she sobbed. At first, I couldn't understand what she was saying. Then, slowly, I started piecing it together. She had contacted an adoption agency. And she had tried to put my baby up for adoption. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. She had told the agency that David and I were drug addicts who had been declared unfit parents by the court. She claimed that she had been granted custody of our baby. And, as his legal guardian, she was putting him up for adoption. She forged legal documents. She lied to professionals. And she almost got away with it. If the agency hadn't caught on to her fake paperwork, she might have actually succeeded in taking my child away. And now, she was facing serious charges. Fraud. Misrepresentation. She was calling me because she was terrified of what was going to happen to her. She wanted me to help her. I hung up the phone. And I felt nothing. No sympathy. No sadness. Because she deserved this. She had gone too far. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I sat there, staring at my phone, replaying the conversation I had just had with my mother, Caroline. She had just admitted to trying to give my baby away. She had contacted an adoption agency, forged legal documents, and claimed that my husband, David, and I were drug addicts who had lost custody of our son. And now? She was in serious legal trouble, and she wanted my help. I should have been shaking with rage. I should have been crying, panicking, screaming. But I didn't feel anything. Because at that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. That night, I told David everything. He sat in stunned silence for a moment, then said, "We're suing her." I nodded. Because that was the only logical next step. She had tried to steal our baby. There was no coming back from that. The very next morning, David and I met with a lawyer. By then, the adoption agency had already reported her for fraud. So not only was she facing criminal charges, but we were also going to sue her ourselves. Within a few days, the paperwork was filed. And Caroline was officially being sued for civil damages, on top of the criminal case against her. She was now under house arrest while the legal process played out. And even though she couldn't physically come near us, she still had ways to reach me. That's when the emails started. Every single day, I woke up to long, desperate emails from my mother. She begged me to drop the lawsuit. She apologized over and over again, saying she had just been overwhelmed by my sister Madeline's wedding and had made a stupid mistake. But she still didn't take responsibility. She kept insisting that she had only done it because she was trying to do what was best for everyone. As if committing fraud and trying to give my baby away was something normal people did. For a while, I just ignored her. But then, one day, she wrote something that stung. "You made a promise to your father, Henry. You said you would take care of me, no matter what. Is this what taking care of me looks like?" That one got to me. Because she was right, before my father passed away, I had promised him I would always look after her. Even if she was difficult. Even if she was selfish. But this? This was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. That's when I realized something. She wasn't just apologizing, she was manipulating me. She was using my father's death to try and make me pity her. And that was disgusting. That's when I made up my mind. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. She had ruined any chance of me ever forgiving her. And now, she was going to have to face the consequences. As soon as Caroline realized I wasn't dropping the lawsuit, she did what she always did. She ran to the family to make herself the victim. At first, I didn't care. I figured no one in their right mind would defend her after what she had done. But then my uncle, Philip, called me. "You need to stop this nonsense," he said. "She's your mother." I could already feel my blood boiling. "She tried to put my son up for adoption behind my back," I said. "How is that nonsense?" "She made a mistake," he said. "She's not a criminal." I laughed out loud. "She literally committed fraud. That's a crime." But Philip didn't care about that. He told me that the amount of money I was demanding from Caroline in the lawsuit was too high and that I was being unfair to her. "She raised you. She took care of you when you were a baby," he said. "And this is how you repay her?" That's when I snapped. "If you care so much about her, then why don't you pay the settlement?" I shot back. Why don't you bail her out? There was silence on the other end of the line. Then he started yelling at me. Calling me names. Saying I was a horrible daughter. I hung up. And just like that, I was done with him too. If my uncle's reaction had pissed me off, my sister's reaction sent me over the edge. Unlike Philip, Madeline never called me directly. Instead, she started talking about me behind my back. She called up every relative we had and told them that I was suing Caroline because I was jealous of her wedding. According to Madeline, I wasn't suing our mother because she tried to steal my baby. No, I was just doing it to ruin her big day. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had already cut off my mother. I had just cut off my uncle. Now, I realized I was going to have to cut off my sister too. And honestly, I was okay with that. Because at this point, I had no family left except for David and our son. And that was all I needed. Meanwhile, as all this family drama unfolded, Caroline's legal troubles were getting worse. She was still under house arrest, but now, she had officially been served with legal documents for my lawsuit. At first, she tried to negotiate. She asked for mediation so we could settle the lawsuit out of court. So we tried. But every time we sat down with our lawyers, Caroline would get emotional and start screaming. At one point, she even stormed out of a session. It became clear that mediation wasn't going to work. She had dug her own grave, and now, she was going to have to deal with it. The biggest irony? She had done all of this to make sure Madeline's wedding stayed the most important event of the year. But because of her own actions, now the only thing the family could talk about was her criminal case. Not Madeline's wedding. If she had just left me alone, Madeline would have had the spotlight she wanted. But instead? Her wedding was now just another event. Because Caroline's crime was the biggest family scandal anyone had ever heard of. And honestly, that was poetic justice. For the past few weeks, my mother, Caroline, had been doing everything in her power to avoid facing the consequences of her actions. She had tried crying and begging. She had tried manipulating me by bringing up my father. She had tried turning the family against me to make me look like the villain. And now that none of that had worked, she was trying to drag out the lawsuit for as long as possible, hoping I'd get exhausted and drop it. Unfortunately for her, that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't stopping until she paid for what she did. Even though I was fully prepared to go to trial, Caroline insisted on mediation, claiming that she wanted to work things out. Honestly, I think she just didn't want the lawsuit to go to court because she knew she would lose. So, I agreed to mediation. Not because I wanted to forgive her, but because I knew that if we could get her to settle, it would be less stressful for my family. But from the moment the first session started, I could tell it was a complete waste of time. Every time the lawyers tried to discuss terms, Caroline would get overly emotional. She would start crying, raising her voice, and acting like she was the victim. At one point, she even stormed out of the room. After the third failed mediation attempt, even her own lawyer was getting frustrated with her. That's when I realized something. She wasn't actually trying to settle. She was just trying to stall for time. And that's when I decided that I was done playing nice. Since mediation had failed, we officially moved forward with preparing for trial. That meant gathering evidence, collecting witness statements, and making sure we had everything ready to go in court. One of the main witnesses in the case was the adoption agency worker who had caught my mother's fraud. When I spoke to them, they told me that my mother had fully believed she would get away with it. She had even gone as far as to fabricate entire conversations about how a judge had ruled my husband, David, and I unfit to parent. She had fake documents showing that she was my baby's legal guardian. She had done all of this with zero remorse. I felt physically sick hearing how much effort she had put into trying to steal my child. And at that moment, my anger hardened into something else. Determination. She was going to pay for this. And now that we were officially heading to court, there was nothing she could do to stop it. If my uncle, Philip, had been annoying, my sister, Madeline, was outright unbearable. Even though she knew exactly what our mother had done, she still insisted that this lawsuit was all about her. "You're just doing this to ruin my wedding," she told anyone who would listen. "You've always been jealous of me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I hadn't even spoken to her in months. I had stayed far away from her wedding. And yet, in her mind, I was the problem. She had started gossiping to everyone about how I was being spiteful and overdramatic. She even convinced a few extended family members that I was just dragging out the lawsuit to punish our mother. But I didn't care. Because I knew that people who actually used their brains would see the truth. And sure enough, some of them did. At first, most of the family stayed out of it. But as more and more details about what Caroline had done came out, people started to change their tune. My aunt, Melissa, was the first one to reach out. I had no idea it was this bad, she told me. She told us she was just trying to help. She never mentioned forging documents. Then my cousin, Nathan, called me and said, "If I were you, I would have pressed charges too." Suddenly, Madeline's little whisper campaign against me wasn't working anymore. Because people were actually thinking for themselves. And that meant my mother was losing support. She had spent her whole life making sure Madeline had everything she ever wanted. And now? She was completely alone. After weeks of talking about me behind my back, Madeline finally decided to confront me in person. One afternoon, while David was at work and I was home with the baby, she showed up unannounced. I didn't even let her inside. I opened the door just enough to look at her and said, "What do you want?" She was furious. "You ruined my wedding," she snapped. "Mom was supposed to help pay for it. But now she can't, because of you." I stared at her in disbelief. "She tried to steal my baby, and you're mad at me? You could have let it go," she hissed. "But no, you had to make this a big legal thing." That was it. I slammed the door in her face. But she didn't leave. She stood outside my house screaming about how unfair everything was for her. She went on for so long that the neighbors came outside to watch. That's when I decided I had enough. I called the cops. Within minutes, they arrived, and when they tried to get Madeline to leave, she started screaming threats about me and my child. I won't repeat what she said. But it was bad enough that even the cops looked disturbed. One of the officers pulled me aside and said, "You should get a restraining order." And you know what? That's exactly what I planned to do. After what happened with Madeline, I sat down with David, and we had a long talk. We decided it was time to move. We were already dealing with the lawsuit. We were already dealing with Caroline's legal case. Now, Madeline was making physical threats. We needed a fresh start. We decided to move to a new home so they wouldn't know where to find us. Change our phone numbers so they couldn't contact us. Get a restraining order against Madeline. Because I was done playing this game with them. I had spent my whole life trying to be a good daughter and keep the peace. But I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a mother now. And my only priority was my child. Nothing else mattered. Not my mother. Not my sister. Not the family drama. All that mattered was keeping my son safe. And if that meant burning every last bridge I had left, then so be it. The day my mother, Caroline, was officially convicted was the day I finally felt free. For months, I had been dragged through hell. My mother had tried to steal my baby and put him up for adoption behind my back. My sister, Madeline, had spent weeks slandering me, spreading lies, and even showing up at my house to scream at me in the middle of my neighborhood. My uncle had called me a terrible daughter, my extended family had taken sides, and my own mother had tried to manipulate me into forgiving her. But now? Now, it was over. The court had ruled against her. She was convicted on all charges. And all I could think was, she brought this on herself. A few weeks before my mother's trial started, I was officially contacted by the prosecution. They wanted me to testify against her. So did the adoption agency employees who had caught her forgery. She had tried to lie, manipulate, and forge documents to take my baby away from me. And now, she was about to pay the price. During the trial, her lawyer tried to paint her as a mentally distressed woman who had made a horrible mistake. He argued that she had been so overwhelmed by my sister's wedding that she had acted irrationally. But the court wasn't buying it. The prosecution brought all the evidence forward, the fake court documents she had provided to the adoption agency. The recorded phone calls where she claimed to be my baby's legal guardian. The emails where she begged me to cover for her and fix it. By the time I took the stand, it was already obvious that she was going to lose. She had committed fraud, forgery, and misrepresentation. She wasn't just a manipulative mother. She was a criminal. The judge agreed. He convicted her on all charges. Because she was a first-time offender, she was able to avoid jail time, but her punishment was still severe. She was sentenced to a massive fine paid as restitution to both the adoption agency and me. Hundreds of hours of community service. Court-mandated mental health treatment in a rehabilitation facility. I hadn't spoken to her since our lawsuit settled. And after her conviction, I had no plans to ever see her again. She was dead to me. You'd think that after all this, my sister, Madeline, would have learned to keep her mouth shut. But instead, she decided to betray our mother, in the most dramatic way possible. Not because she felt bad for what had happened. Not because she had finally realized the truth. No. She did it because she was afraid her wedding would get cancelled. See, Madeline's fiancé, Ethan, and his family were horrified by what had happened. They didn't want to be associated with a woman who had committed fraud and forgery just to get rid of her grandchild. And because of that, Ethan's family was seriously considering postponing the wedding. Which meant Madeline had to do damage control. She took to social media and made a huge post about how she was distancing herself from Caroline. She pretended she had known nothing about what our mother had done. She claimed that she had been completely unaware of the situation until she found out about the trial. And she acted like she had always been against it. It was honestly hilarious. Because I knew the truth. I knew that she had spent months defending our mother. I knew that she had told the whole family that I was ruining her wedding on purpose. I knew that she had shown up at my house to yell at me for suing our mother. And now? Now she was pretending to be on my side. It was pathetic. But I didn't care. Because I was done with her, too. Let her lie to herself. She deserved everything that was happening. A few weeks after the trial ended, David and I finally moved to a new house. We had made the decision months ago, but after everything that had happened with my mother and my sister, it felt like the right time for a fresh start. I had already gone no contact with my entire family. I had already blocked their numbers. Now, they wouldn't even know where to find us. And that was the best part. We were finally free. I had spent years trying to be a good daughter. I had spent years trying to honor my father's last wish and take care of my mother. But in the end, she didn't deserve my care. She didn't deserve my forgiveness. And I was finally okay with that. Final thoughts. Looking back, I think the saddest part of this whole mess is how Caroline ended up. She spent her entire life obsessed with Madeline. She did everything for her. She sacrificed everything for her. She even risked going to prison to make sure Madeline's wedding had the spotlight. And what did she get in return? Nothing. The second Madeline realized that siding with her could ruin her wedding, she threw her away like trash. I should have felt bad for my mother. I should have pitied her. But I didn't. Because at the end of the day, she made her own choices. And now, she had to live with them. As for me, I was finally done. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a mother. And that was the only role I cared about. Because my son was the only family that mattered. And that was all I needed.